Hello, I'm Mark West. Thank you for joining me for this celebration of the 150th anniversary of the publication of Through the Looking Glass, What Alice Found There. The book was actually published in December 1871, which makes 2021 the year that we are all celebrating the 150th anniversary of the publication of this classic book. Now, the publication date on the book is listed as 1872, but we know that it actually came out in 1871, making 2021 the year that we're celebrating the anniversary of this book. In honor of this event, I'm going to read two of the poems that are included in Through the Looking Glass. Two great classic poems by Lewis Carroll. One of them is called The Walrus and the Carpenter, and the other is one of the most famous poems in the English language, and that is Jabberwocky. So, here we go. The Walrus and the Carpenter. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said, it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the Walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the Walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at them, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they had many feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock, conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood waiting in a row. The time has come, the Walrus said, to talk of many things, shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings.
But wait a bit,
the oysters cried,
before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat.
Oh, no hurry, said the Carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed.
But not on us.
The oysters cried, turning a little blue.
After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do.
Oh, but the night is fine, the walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. Carpenter said nothing but, cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick after we brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The carpenter said nothing, but the butter is spread too thick. Oh, I weep for you, the walrus said, with sobs. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the carpenter, had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? The answer there came none, because they had eaten everyone. Left the walrus and the carpenter. The next poem is Jabberwocky. And Jabberwocky starts off with Alice being a bit confused. She comes across a book. She's introduced to a book, and she's asked to read this poem, but she can't make it out because the poem was printed in reverse, in mirror image. So I'll read you a little bit about how Alice finds out about Jabberwocky, the poem. So, it's all in some language I don't know, she said to herself. It was like this. Oh. She puzzled over this for some time, but at last a bright thought struck her. Why, it's a looking glass book, of course, and if I hold it up to a glass, the words shall all go right again. And this was the poem that Alice read. Was brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wind. Oh, mimsy were the bulrug groves, and the mome rats outgrave. Oh, beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch, and beware the jub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his purple blade in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while. And as an uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes aflame, came whiffling through the toady wood, burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through. The purple blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead. And with its head, he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Rapturous day, Calloo, Calais! He chortled in his joy. It was brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wind. Oh, mimsy with the border corals and the mole rats out rain. Well, thank you for stopping by. Here's to the 150th anniversary of the publication of Through the Looking Glass.